Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sales Power in Less Than an Hour. This episode today is for the salesperson who is interested in branching out and taking on projects to make a positive impact on the future of their company. We have with us today Mr. Chad Spain. Thanks for joining us today. Chad is an account executive at Whitten and Roy Partnership, where he's a closer and a speaker, and has worked on outbound strategy and other development for their sales team. And he and I actually met on a cold call a couple of months ago when I was first starting out my sales career. And we connected on LinkedIn, and he's so present and supportive there. I just wanted to bring him on the show and get to know him a little better and see what he had to say. So welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if you wouldn't mind starting us off with just a quick story of how you got here.
Yeah, sure. So how I got here. So my background, I actually I haven't taken a very typical route into sales, although I guess it's not too far atypical because people come from all sorts of directions these days. But I have a mechanical engineering background, and I did that for quite a few years. And I had a very client-facing role as an engineer. And I learned pretty quickly that I hated the engineering part of it, but I loved the client-facing part of it. So after the 2008 economic downturn kind of passed and I rode that wave, went into an account management role at a company in a similar industry. I was in a very industrial sector, hated it. So after a little while, left there, went and helped a company start a business. I've had some very interesting pivots, from a $2 billion company to 2 years later, a 3-person organization, out of my friend's garage. I moved halfway across the country to kind of get it off the ground. So we got that off the ground, but I was still in the same industry, hated it. And I decided to throw a pack on my back, and I bought a one-way ticket to Europe, and I traveled for a year. And kind of like really long, juicy story short, I met the founder of Whitten and Roy Partnership at his son's wedding in Slovenia. And he decided to bring me onto a project about 6 months later, and the rest is history, I suppose you could say.
Whoa.
Yeah, I
That
would
is
say that's
so
the
random.
most interesting way we've heard that someone found into their current spot. So that's pretty cool. It's funny how when you meet people, sometimes doors open and you never expect it, but you always end up somewhere. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
speaks a lot to like building your network wherever you go.
Yeah, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I literally remember, so the way it went down was I was just backpacking, right? So I get to Budapest and I'm in this hostel and go down to the bar and, to buy a beer. And there was this guy, it's grungy Eastern Europe. And so, there's graffiti on the walls and things. And there's this guy and he looked like he just got off the golf course, khaki shirt and clean haircut. And, he just smelled like he got off the wrong plane. And I just started chatting with him and I was like, first of all, what are you doing here? You look totally out of place. And it turned out he was on his bachelor party, but he was alone because none of his friends could, it was like the stars aligned, and one of them's mom got cancer, one of them's house flooded, one of them had a visa issue. Just nobody could make it. So poor guy's on his stag party on his own. So I bought him a shot of tequila, and it turned out we had both arrived the same night. We were both leaving the same day. And I was planning to go to Slovenia, and he was getting married in Slovenia to a Slovenian woman. And we just hit it off. And he was like, "Do you have anything nice to wear?" And I was like, "Be careful what you ask for, because I will come to your wedding if that's where you're going with this." And he was like, "Yeah, that's where I'm going with this." And so I just learned to say yes. And when things presented themselves, just go to follow the rabbit down the hole, so to speak.
Wow, that's so cool. First of all, I love anyone who has travel stories, because I feel like that is exactly the place where you learn how to say yes, which is so valuable to us as salespeople. But I wanted to touch on, so the shift from the mechanical engineering degree to like almost entrepreneurship, like if that's what you would even call it, like how did that feel to you internally, emotionally, mentally?
Yeah, that's a good question. Rocky and unknown and a bit scary, to be honest. So when I decided to make that move from Minneapolis to California to, help my friend get his business off the ground, he had a business partner that had flaked out. And I, went down there to kind of fill that role. And I was having trouble in my existing job for other reasons I won't get into, mainly cultural fit. And yeah, I was just in this weird place. I had a house and a relationship in Minneapolis, and I was just miserable. Nothing was working. And I decided to uproot all of it at once. So ended the relationship, sold the house, got rid of my poor dog. That was the saddest part. Um, and yeah, moved halfway across the country and slept on an air mattress for 8 months. Made zero money. Actually, he was like, I can't afford to pay you for a little while, and I said, I'll take it. I just wanted to do something different and sort of like change everything. And it was really, yeah, I don't even know how to put words around it. It was very tumultuous and emotional, and but I learned a lot. I think I've found in my career, I really like doing things that stretch me, and I've put scales on my back, and yeah, push me to just do things that I wouldn't normally be comfortable with. Finding comfort and discomfort is maybe one way of saying it.
Yeah, and the balance between them so that you can still survive, but you're always being stretched.
Exactly.
So Chad, going into the sales part of it, could you tell us an outbound approach that you've used that you found the most success in?
Yeah, it's interesting because so I'll answer your question, but I'll give a little context first. So in Whitten and Roy Partnership, the way that, so just to kind of round out the context, I've been here for 5 years. I started off working on projects with clients, and then I stepped into a more senior role where I was managing projects and started selling our services kind of part-time, and managing some of our teams that would deliver the projects. And then I stepped into a full-time sales role where it really was an account executive position, closing deals. But the thing that was interesting, I didn't even know this, but we weren't doing any outreach whatsoever, no outbound. And all of our business would come through our network and through our partners. And the market segment that I was looking after started to dry up a little bit. There was just this sense of, we're not getting as much stuff coming through our existing channels. And we got to pick up the phone and start, finding some new companies. So I just started doing it, not really knowing anything about it. And today, like kind of fast forward about 1.5 years later or so, I'm putting some structure around it, building a tool, and we're breaking into a new market segment. And to answer your question, I think that the biggest thing, the most important thing in outreach is finding a way to really capture their attention. I think there's a lot of ways of doing that. For me, in the market that I was in, I was really well connected, and it was a small market. So frankly, every single outreach I was able to find some connection I had to that person, through somebody else on LinkedIn, or, a client that we had worked with in their same country. Because by the way, we work all over the world. So, I called on a fintech in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, he just happened to be good friends with a guy that I knew when I lived in Nairobi. I lived in Africa for a few years. And, I leveraged that. So when I wrote the outbound email, I just said, hey, blah, 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 this is what we do. We help businesses solve sales challenges. We're a sales consultancy, by the way. And and I just said, by the way, how do you know so-and-so? Like, he's a good friend of mine from my days in Nairobi. And that's what actually got the response. His like 8-word response was, would love to hear more. Yes, Daniel's awesome, and so I've just found that finding that direct connection is what catches people's attention. It's like, okay, yeah, you belong to be talking to me. You're not just some random person in my inbox.
Yeah, I've heard that stated in a similar way, which is like break the pattern. And I think that's definitely a good way to do that. It's definitely the way I prefer to, because it's so much easier to connect on that personal level with someone. And then you can have a conversation and you'll find out if they have a need or not more naturally. Sometimes it takes a bit longer as an approach, but I feel like that's the best journey on their end. They're not just receiving this this call from someone they don't know or care about, you know, you're sort of forming that relationship. And especially it sounds like you're really what's the word? Like resourceful when it comes to figuring out how you connect with those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said. And I think it's like you can go a couple of different directions. People talk a lot about referrals, right? And there's a piece of research that Brevet Group just recently did that's, how did this go? It's 90% of businesses say they would refer, that had a good experience, would refer you to another business that they think needs your product or service, but only 10% of salespeople ask for a referral, right? So I think that there's something really powerful just in that in and of itself. But you can either name somebody that you have a mutual connection with by doing that research and figuring out what those relationships are, or you can ask for an introduction and for a referral. The challenge is that most people don't pull the trigger on that.
Yeah, and worst thing they can do is say no.
So,
Hang up.
Chad, question for you. So, say I'm a customer or prospect, or let's just say a recent customer of yours, just signed on. How would you ask me for a referral? What does that script look like?
Yeah, well, let's see. If I guess probably the biggest thing is that I don't think I would do it right when they signed on. So, and maybe for a
Probably a
little bit
good
of
idea.
context,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe for a little bit of context, we're a consulting firm, so we'll do an engagement to help them create a transformational change in the way they sell. Not only strategy and tools and and the approach, but also the skill and managing mindset and the soft side. But yeah, I mean, frankly, it's as simple as I think it's once you get into the back end and you start helping them look at the change they've been able to create. We worked with an organization in India, 20-year-old business, and we helped them double their sales in 1 year. 20-year-old organization, and they doubled them overnight through our engagement. And I don't say that with any arrogance, but it was just, that's the power that came from our engagement. And so we just asked them, like, who else do you know that would want to create this kind of change in their sales trajectory? And he said, well, yeah. And and this is the CEO we were talking to. It's CEOs know other CEOs, VPs know other VPs, and he just said, well, yeah, actually I've got 3 people I want to introduce you to, and made those connections.
So it's more of, I guess doing the job first before asking for the referral. I mean, there's more credibility there, so I feel like that would make the most sense versus asking right after the sale. It's probably not going to end up working too well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's most powerful, especially if they have a good experience, because frankly, like, I think people authentically want to help other people. So if they have a great experience with whatever you've brought them, and you sort of are guiding them to help see that great experience, and they feel it, I think people pretty naturally say, like, oh, yeah, I don't know, you want to, if you stumble onto gold and there's enough gold for everybody, you're going to want to call your friends over, hey, look, there's gold here, like, come help yourself, right? So I think there's some power to that. But frankly, I think on the front end, you could do it too by asking a question like, what are you most excited for about this? Why did you decide to sign up? And okay, great. Well, just out of curiosity, before we even get into it, do you know anybody else that you think might have a similar challenge that we should kind of pick up a conversation with as we get going with you? It's just asking, I think. I don't think it needs to be a big question. Just pretty simple.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you backpacked, ended up at a wedding in Slovenia, got a job, left your life behind to move cross country to not get paid, and ended up in a new position. Obviously, you don't struggle with confidence when it comes to this stuff. So could you give anyone out there some tips when it comes to confidence on making cold calls, or just really anything in general with sales?
Yeah, I was on a virtual conference yesterday, right? And one of the people that was on there was so I'll get to it, a little story first. So one of the people that was in the group, there was like 8 of us. It was like a networking thing, and people were like exploring opportunities and interesting connections, and somebody was kind of managing the group. And there was one young woman in there, and I reached out. This is one thing I like to do, is I reach out to everybody that I end up having some sort of networking relationship with on LinkedIn, and just say something relevant, and just, hey, good to connect. I'm trying to build my network. And so I reached out to her, and I saw that she was an intern. She looked like she was young. She was an intern at a big technology company everybody would know. And she didn't say anything in the networking session. So I just reached out and said, hey, like, it's good to meet you, hope all is well. And she said, yeah, I wish I would have gotten an opportunity to speak. And so I responded, and I said, well, you didn't ask, but if you'd like a thought on that, and I just sort of gave her a little, I don't know, coaching, in the message on LinkedIn. And I just said, you just got to take action, just stick up your hand and say, I'm new. I just graduated. Does anybody have any advice for how I can get started in sales, or get started in cold calling, or whatever your ask is? But just point it out. I'm new. I don't know what I'm doing. Does anybody have, like, can somebody show me where the bathroom is? So my answer is just, it's like, whenever you notice that you're not taking action because there's a fear, or there's something you're telling yourself about how it's going to look, you don't know what you're doing, that's the best time to just jump off the cliff and raise your hand, or pick up the phone and make the call. Because you're going to learn. I mean, worst case scenario, you look like a total doofus, but then what are you going to learn from that? And I don't know, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Always something to learn. I think that's good, because I know a lot of people, including myself in the past, have struggled with, storytelling. Like, I was stuck in these stories in my head of, before calling a prospect or a current customer, of just playing along the script in my head of what was going to happen before it even happened. But I think you're right. It's simple as, you just have to jump in to swim. That's all there is to it. So sometimes you just got to go for it, especially on these outbound calls. You just don't know what's going to happen. You can do some research on the product. You could even have some prior emails with them, but until you make that phone call and talk to them, you don't know. So it's not worth it to sit back and play these stories in your head, which are usually negative, let's be honest. So that's good.
And usually untrue.
Almost always untrue, yes. You do get a lot of no's, but not all those no's are as mean as they were.
That's what you would say to yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Chad, I have a question more related to, like, what you're working on right now at work. I know you guys handle a lot of sales leadership, sales leaders. You interact with a lot of sales leaders. That's the sentence. What are some of the main challenges that you guys are coming across that you're trying to help your clients with? If you could share just like one or two. I'm curious to know what the state of leadership is today, and if you've noticed any kind of changes over the past few years that you've been a part of the company.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I could go like 18 directions with this, but you've asked for one or two, which is less fun and more challenging.
You're welcome.
So, I'd say one thing is that everybody knows that you need to uncover a pain, or so spin selling, right? Problem, what is it? Situation, problem, impact, need. Everybody knows that we need to find the pain points. We need to build the business case in order to help them see ROI. And I'd say that one of the things that we see most common is that the way that actually gets executed isn't well done. There's a skill and art to how you do discovery in a phone call to uncover the it's not just surface level problems like how many hours are wasted by your sales team every week. It's like, great, so what? Why is that a problem? How does that impact your bottom line? How does that impact you as a manager in what you're trying to go after and your career path personally, right? How does that impact your VP in what he's trying to create? How does that impact the investors and what the investors into the business care about? you can really, you know, just go deeper basically on it's like there's the problem, but I think too many people just stop at the surface level, or they kind of skip over it and they don't get into like, why does this, yeah, why is this making you bleed and keeping you up at night? I don't like that phrase actually, what keeps you up at night. I wouldn't ask that as a question, but truly like, what is causing them to lose sleep, you know? But you've got to dig deeper and follow the breadcrumbs, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. I think pain points are obviously the reason we're trying to sell to them. And you have to find those out. But I agree, there's different ways to go about it. And like you said, it's the questions of, how does it affect you and your time? So sometimes you just have to go deeper into the question than them just saying, yeah, our reps spend a lot of time putting deals together. You want to touch on that a little bit more. And I don't want to say you want to make them feel their pain, but you're doing value-based selling, right? You have a product that you think they need. You find that they need it. You just don't want to shove it down their throat. So,
right. And I'd say, what you said about you don't want to, it's, I forget exactly how you phrased this just now, but you don't want them to, you don't want to, I don't know, make them feel the pain. But to reframe that slightly, I think you do want to get to a place where you're clear and aligned with them, sitting on the same side of the table. Is there a pain here big enough that it hurts? Because the thing is that I think most salespeople, and Brandy, I'm realizing your question was about sales leaders, but this is what we see in sales teams, and I think the sales leaders don't know how to develop the skill set, is maybe to land the plane with your question. But how do you as a sales, so I think too often when we're in our own world, we're so used to just how things are going, we're just caught up in the day-to-day operations, that we're not very close to the problem that the salesperson calling me can help me solve. So a really good salesperson, I think, navigates and guides the prospective buyer to explore that, and not in a pushy way, not in like, I'm going to get you to feel your problems, because I want to close the sale, but in a way that's like, look, like, let's explore this quickly. Is there an actual problem here? And I'm going to ask you some questions, to basically get to the crux of it. And frankly, if there's not a big, so this is the other thing I think salespeople don't often do. They've got quota on the mind, and they think, what do I got to do to get this to move forward? Instead of, how do I just help you make a great decision? And if you've got a big pain point, great. Let's measure it, see how big it is, that it's worth solving, and we'll show you the way that we can help you solve it. But if not, if you don't have a big problem or it's not worth solving, great. Like, don't do this because you don't need it. And that can be so refreshing. I would call this creating a buying atmosphere, basically saying, look, if you don't end up needing this at the end of the day, we don't want you to do it. And I just think that creates people to it takes the pressure off. It's like, oh, you're actually for me and not just for your quota. Okay, well, let me tell you what's going on, and all of a sudden you're aligned and partnered and on the same side of the table.
Okay, I would like to hear about a failure that you've had in your career and what you learned from it.
I can only, once again, you make me only pick one. It's tough. A failure that I've had in my career.
It would be tougher if you had said, I've never failed. Then we might have to
Yeah. Well, then you just not want to air this because I wouldn't be worthy of the interview. Come on. I've got too many to pick from. That's the problem. You know what I'll say is that actually when I jumped into full-time sales, in Whitten and Roy, so just a few years ago, I spent too much time on, it's funny, I was actually talking to one of my colleagues about this just today. I spent too much time talking to too small a fish, wasted a lot of time talking to too small a fish. That led to a tough conversation, a few months in, right? And frankly, it still affects me. It's like, oh man, I wasted so much time. I could have done so much more with that chunk of time where I wasn't getting much progress because I was talking to, frankly, companies that couldn't afford, I mean, legitimately couldn't afford, they didn't have the money in the bank to like create the lift in their sales that they needed. And what I realized, because we didn't really have this well articulated. So, I mean, this was, I think my failure in this helped us learn something as an organization that, all right, like here is our ICP, like here is the ideal client that we want to go after. And so we were able to start to articulate that a little bit more effectively. But I'd say that was the biggest thing, was just, really missing some good ramp time, and having to have a tough internal conversation at one point. But I took it seriously, and I was able to, I turned it around very quickly. So it was really, I guess it was a failure and I mean, I view failure as learning opportunities. So, that's kind of how it morphed.
Yeah, man, I was just listening back to the recording of our call in May or whenever that was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and because I was curious, just to see what I said and what you said. It was only a 10-minute call, which was honestly one of the shorter ones for me back then. I used to spend like 30 minutes on the phone just because I struggled to focus my conversations and lead the call. And I didn't see it as, I saw it as like, oh, I got someone on the phone, like I'm going to talk to them, we're going to be best friends, versus like I'm going to respect their time because I called them out of the blue, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have 30 minutes to give to me necessarily. Like, probably try to make it 5, Brandy, and stop trying to make friends with everyone you talk to. Like, that was one of my struggles, and I still struggle with that. And it
Mm.
reminds me of what you just talked about, because I don't know if we should use any of this, but just because you asked, it reminds me
Yeah,
of what you just talked about, because it's like, yeah, I don't want to tell people that I spent that much time on phone calls, but also, to be fair, I'd never made any before. It's like when you're new to full-time sales, you kind of have to fall on your face to figure out what works and what doesn't. And like,
totally.
that's what the internal conversation is there for, is like, yeah, it sucks to hear, and it's probably a little scary too. But on the other hand, if you hadn't heard that, they could have just said, you're out. It's like, no, that is a learning experience. That is definitely valuable. And it sounds like something that you took to heart, and it made you a better salesperson.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, well said. And yeah, use whatever. I'm kind of realized, it's funny. I don't know if you know who Amy Quick is. She's like a well-known person in LinkedIn and has a big following. And actually, her and Patrick D started Five on Friday. I don't know if you've
Oh,
ever heard of that.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she's one of the co-founders of that. I bring her up because she posted a video a couple of months back, and I just remember her humility in this was striking, where she had started a new role and and let's see, she was asked to like pitch her company on a webinar or something, and she was brand new in the role, a new company, and she literally said, "Wait a minute, like I don't know what I'm doing yet. Like I don't want to do this in front of this wide audience. Like, I don't feel competent to do it." And of course, she did it and did well at it, but I can't remember. I just remember the way that she told this story on this video clip on LinkedIn was just so humble. And I just thought, wow, like, this is something I really see changing in the sales world. And frankly, I think the business world is that people are becoming more human. It's just like, look, sales is tough. Like, let down the guard. Like, we're all human beings. Let's try to help each other win. Let's do it. Obviously do what you need to do to produce your own results, but let's help other people win. And when they're tripping and falling down, like help them up and help them learn from that trip and that fall down, right? And I just see that changing. I come from this really stuffy corporate environment, and I learned some bad habits from it. I think, just kind of having a wall up, having a shell. And I think as I work with more interesting sort of human companies that sort of operate with like a human element, I guess you could say, yeah, it's just something I really appreciate.
Yeah, man, that corporate environment is not fun. Even though it's like you're doing stuff you don't stand for, you're forced to because that's your job. So when you get to go somewhere else where your ideas are heard and you could try new things, it's definitely a breath of fresh air, which, Brandy, I'm glad for you. You started your sales career at PandaDoc. Because there's certain places, I've been in the past and have friends in the past where, to me, and I'll admit that I was discouraged from sales for a while because I was in the wrong type of sales. I was at the wrong company, like maybe not surrounded by the best people. So for people that are interested in sales, don't be afraid to start fresh, whether it's a new industry or a new company, because if it's
Mm-hmm.
something you enjoy and feel like you're good at, there's always an opportunity for you somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely got
That's it.
super lucky, guys. I'm sorry you both had to struggle to get to some place you enjoyed, but I can't help
We
it.
struggled for you, Brandy. It was all for you.
It's
We
all
took
for
them
you.
for the team.
Oh man.
So, Chad, a question we ask everyone on here. We usually get different answers, which is great. So we'll ask you, what's something someone can do today to get better at sales?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, for me, I like to tell stories, so I'm going to answer this one with a story. Um, I left out one part of my career, which was that in between that 10-month trip and starting a Whitten and Roy Partnership, there was a gap. So I had a 6-month window where, it was like before the first project was going to start. I was kind of done with my trip. I couldn't look at another church or temple or pagoda, and I needed to go home and do something different. So I got introduced to this group of people in California that were starting a company. They had all knocked on doors for this company called Southwestern in Nashville, and they started a business knocking on doors selling solar in California, which is, there's a big, a lot of people sell alarms and solar. It's a big thing. And I'll never, I went and basically I went and met these guys, and they were like, I basically said, look, I'm starting a project in 6 months. I've never knocked on doors before, but I'd really like to cut my teeth in B2C. So if you're willing to coach me, I'm willing to give you 110% for 6 months, right? And he said, all right, that's all, you're hired. And it was pure commission. And so I went and knocked on doors for 6 months, and he's the manager. He's one of my good friends today. I talked to him a few hours ago, actually. He was he was at one of my meetings one time that I had, right? And he just sat back. He let me run it, and he sat back and he was taking notes on his phone. At first, I thought he was texting, but later I found out he took like 18 pages of notes. After the meeting, like I noticed that it didn't really, it didn't feel like they were with me, but I didn't know why, right? And here I'm getting to your answer, but I didn't know why. And after the meeting, I was like, all right, give me some feedback. Like, I'm a very curious person. I like love to learn. So I was like, give me the feedback. And he was a great manager. He knew how to coach, which is, you give a couple things you did well to kind of boost that confidence, especially when you're new in sales. And you give one or two things to work on. That's it. You give too much, and then it kind of, blows people down, and they, oh God, this is so hard. I have so much to learn. I can't do it. So just give me one or two things to work on. And I looked at him and I said, come on, Dave, like, give it all to me. I know you've got more, right? And he said, you want it all? I said, yeah. So he ran through his 18 pages of notes. And I mean, I couldn't believe the little nuances he saw, when they crossed their arms and looked down or looked at his watch. Maybe I saw all these little things, and I said this, and then he looked away, and, all these tiny nuances in body language, tone, all of it. And my eyes rolled back in my head from overload, right? And then he said, oh, that was too much. And I said, how did you know that was too much? Like, you're right, but how did you know? And I just couldn't believe his attention to, body language and these things. But I think it was that day that I realized how much you need to ask the question, why? Why did this work? Why didn't this work? Like, the phrase came to me, or somebody said the phrase to me once: inspect what you expect. If you expect something to go well, we'll inspect how it goes, right? And tune in and ask why things worked and why things didn't. So to cleanly and very succinctly answer your question, I think new salespeople, they're so overwhelmed by like how it feels to sell and like this, stress and kind of you feel anxious getting on the call and nervous and all that. Well, take a deep breath and, do a little meditation in the morning, calm yourself down and tune in. You do something, did it work, didn't it work, and why? So just ask why more often and we'll try to understand why things are working or not working.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, asking why and in doing that, being observant and paying attention to detail. I think those are all definitely great things that could help someone tremendously. So it's a good tip.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Chad. This is really great. It was great to get to know you on a deeper level too.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Yeah, likewise. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
For sure.